This is the Goal Talk Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Goal Talk Podcast from WordStream. This is episode 3, and today we're going to be talking about how to craft a value proposition that's going to be really valuable for your business. So today with me, I have Elaine Stone, who also works on the marketing team, on the product marketing team specifically. And we're going to talk through the ins and outs of a value proposition and what it means for businesses and how you can create one for yours. So hello, welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the podcast. Super excited that you're here with us today. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and, your role at WordStream specifically so that we can kind of better understand what it is you do and how, your past roles have kind of geared you up for this.
Sure. So I do product marketing here at WordStream. I've been here since April. And so what I do with product marketing is I help different product teams bring their products to market. So most of my effort there is really focused on the weeks leading up to the release of a new feature or a new service or a product. But I'm also involved in the whole process of helping make sure that our products and our services are really deeply connected to our customers' needs. Always making sure that our customer is at the center of what we do, and making sure that we're not just building stuff because it's cool, but making sure that everything we do is useful. A lot of that involves a lot of writing, lots of communication, lots of building value propositions for some big things and for small launches as they go out. So it's something I do very frequently. Previously, I did product marketing for a small children's book publisher, where I was always crafting lots of copy and messaging for all of the books that would go out. It was always so much fun to get the new shipment of books for the year and get to open it. It was like Christmas twice a year.
That's really cool.
Tons of fun getting to work with the editors and really help to make sure that we're making stuff again that is going to be really useful for parents and for kids.
Was that also in Boston?
It was in Cambridge, yeah.
Cambridge, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's super exciting. So today, as you know, we're going to be talking about value propositions and why they're important. And then value propositions for individual products, but also, how that relates to the overall business as a whole. So to start off, I think it would be helpful just to kind of get our feet wet by just kind of talking about the basics. So how would you define a value proposition?
Yeah, so a value proposition is basically a very simple short statement of why your customer, your prospect should go with you as opposed to somebody else. As you said, this could be something that's really important for an individual product or service, but also for like a larger organization. And those different product value propositions should be related to each other very organically.
Cool. So I think the first thing that I think about as, an individual who's not creating value propositions all the time, when I think about a value proposition, I assume that most companies or teams that are bringing products to market are kind of inherently building these value propositions as they're creating their product or their service. So I would think that those two things go hand in hand in kind of their why of creating a product or a service. But you're saying that this should be like defined, spelled out. Are there any instances where it's just kind of like inherent and you just do you find that it just everything goes better and is more organized when you have it completely set out and every single word's outlined?
Some of that depends on the scale of the project and the scale of the team that's involved. If you're really doing a good job of customer research, understanding what your customers need, market research, understanding what else is out there that your customers could choose from, and you're really making sure that you're documenting that well for the people you're working with. If you have a really small team, you maybe could get away with it just being an inherent knowledge in terms of creating a product, maybe not in terms of launching it. But even when you're creating a product, and once you've got wide groups of people and different functions involved, you really need to have something clearly defined really soon. But even when you go to launch something, even with a really small team, if you've got like one message that you can rally around for that product or that service, that really helps you internally to be able to push forward to do what you need to do. And then it really helps your customers understand who you are, where you sit in the market, and how your different products and services can relate to each other.
So that was going to be my follow-up question is, are value propositions something that we should look at as an internal resource, or are they something that our customers should see and also rally behind? Is it something that like everyone should kind of be using and be on board for?
You might want to have two slightly different statements, but even if you have just one, that could be really helpful across the board. Internally, if you say you are developing a new product and you need to rally up your salesperson to go out there and sell it, you need to get them excited. You really need to be able to arm them with something they can use. And if they get it, they will be able to get your prospects to get it and have that aha moment.
Yeah. They can kind of like extrapolate upon that value prop that you're arming them with, and then allow them to, define more solidly outside of that just single word. Because no one's going to like, as a salesperson, just use a single sentence and say, this is why, and then have the person be like, you're right, I'll buy.
But it's a great launch pad for storytelling.
For sure.
Conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that it's super important. Do you think that the importance or the level of usage changes whether a company is focused on being B2B, B2C, if they're having a physical product versus a service, or do any of those factors change things, or is it kind of across the board?
The way you communicate it will probably change, just because the way you communicate with your different audiences changes with each of those different business models.
Right.
But you need a value prop no matter what, because your end user, whether they're an educator or a librarian or a parent or someone sitting in an office 24/7, or I don't know, someone who flies fighter planes or something. At the end of the day, they're all a person who's going to sit at the couch at the end of the day and be really glad that the workday is over. Every single person is in that same place. Yeah. And you're selling to that person. You're not really selling to a company or whatever else that could be. You're selling to a person.
Absolutely. So I'm feeling like there might be parallels between having a value proposition for your business and having like a company mission statement or like a company slogan or something like that. Like at WordStream, we have a separate mission statement, but our slogan type thing is online advertising made easy. Nike has, just do it. There are like Burger King, have it your way. There's like all of these little like slogans that we have. How do those differ from your value proposition in one, how you position it to the outside world, but also in how it's used internally and as a marketing source?
One really quick, easy, relevant way for us to think about it is that your slogan is clickbait and your value proposition is an actual article. They're not different in length to that extreme, but in terms of like what they offer, in terms of the meat, that's kind of the distinction. So a slogan is just catchy, it's fun, it gets to the feel of what you're going for, but it doesn't provide any information that's actually functional. So Nike says, just do it. Do what? Yeah. It's a great slogan, but it doesn't actually communicate who they're talking to, what they offer, why they're offering it, and why you should buy from them and not somebody else. In contrast, Nike's mission statement is bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. This fun asterisk next to athlete that says, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So that's communicating much more of like their vision for the whole thing, like why they're here and what they're doing, but it's still not a value prop. A value prop is going to be something that is very specific for them to different product lines, different products themselves, about how they're bringing that innovation and that inspiration to individual people and different types of athletes.
So for them, they might have hundreds of value propositions for hundreds of product lines or products or, types of shoes versus their overall slogan and mission statement. So it sounds like, not to reduce your explanation, but just to kind of make it what I'm taking from it, it sounds like your mission statement is more of a, why it's important.
Yep.
And your slogan is more of like a marketing tool.
Yeah.
To get
They're both
people
marketing tools.
Yeah, but nobody's remembering someone's mission statement and saying like, like reiterating that mission statement and just being like, Nike.
Yeah.
It's like, just do it. Everybody knows what brand that kind of goes along with.
Yep.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In general, what specifically should a value prop aim to tell customers? So like the external ones, how should those, work to communicate value?
So it should communicate a couple things. What you're actually offering, why it matters, and why the customer should care, and something about how you do it. So whether that's a product or a service, those could have slightly different flavors, but those are kind of the three elements. And then the fourth element is overall just really making sure that your value proposition captures your voice as a brand, whether that's fun and playful or really smart and academic, or anything along any spectrum like that.
Do you think that you've mentioned that they should be like pretty short? So I'm wondering how hard it is to fit all 3 or 4 of those essential aspects into a sentence or a
Very
phrase.
hard.
Yeah.
Writing something short is always a lot harder than writing something longer.
Yeah, because you can just use a bunch of words that make sense to you. But the harder part sounds like choosing the exact right word to convey in the right way what you want to sell. Yep. Do you have any like tips for how to go about doing that?
Write more and then cut.
Okay.
Use action verbs. Start sentences with action verbs. Kill any adjectives, adverbs, preposition phrases right away. And read it out loud and have other people read it out loud.
Yeah.
Write lots of different versions and have lots of different people read all of them out loud.
Yeah. Until you get one that sounds natural.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see it being an exercise of writing a lot of long sentences in like the same long sentence in a lot of different ways until you come up with something that seems to, overall encompass what you're trying to portray.
One thing that my boss and I would do at my previous company, whenever we would create a catalog for a new season of books, is there'd be like a different set of offerings on each page that would be grouped thematically or by age or something like that. And each one had a headline and a deck at the top, and that deck was essentially a value prop for what was on the page as a whole. And so what we would do is I would write 5 to 10 different options, and then we'd sit in front of the computer together and we just go through and mix and match different phrases. Some things she'd just like kill right away as being, this is clunky, this is bad, and I would usually know that this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. But then we'd be able to mix and match things and put together something that works. And it was really helpful to do that as a team, as 2 writers, because you could get 2 different perspectives. And frequently something I would think that was not any good would be something that she would select, and then we'd tweak it a little and it would be just what we needed.
Yeah. I think that's super interesting. Recently, so I'm on the content team within our marketing department, and recently we went through an exercise of creating and writing a value proposition for our blog specifically. And that was a really cool exercise because what we ended up doing, there was 4 people involved. Each of us wrote something that we thought was necessary to use in the value prop. And then we saw where there was overlap. And where there was overlap, those things were essential and like needed to be in there because we all thought that they were essential aspects. And then where one person had an idea, we would talk about it more and try to just like compound all of these things and then make it flow.
Yeah.
So once you have a value proposition, can you give me some examples of ways that you can, actively use it, whether that be in your overall marketing strategy and advertising specifically, in educating your staff? Like, how should we be thinking about putting these to actual use?
It would depend a lot on the product and your service and your type of business and who you're working with, but definitely making sure that everyone you're working with has access to it, that they know it, that they get it, whether that's communicating that to everyone via an email or you talk about it in a meeting, whatever is up to your usual cadence and what works for you. You could just use your value prop all the time, but on the internet, that is not always the best thing to do because then that feels very redundant and Google doesn't like it. But having something that's really solid that you can go back to over and over and over, that people can recognize, is always really helpful. So a lot of people might put this on like a landing page for a product up at the very top.
Yeah.
Is a really helpful place. I've seen companies put it more like in a footer or like just below a banner image. You definitely want to use at least phrases from your value prop throughout a lot of your messaging. And if you have like a press release, you definitely want your value prop essentially in that first paragraph. You want to kind of massage it into something that fits in that context.
Yeah.
To really make sure that you're communicating why this matters to any potential journalist that picks up that release.
Right. So you've talked about voice a couple of times. I'm interested to know if, I mean, it seems like your overall value proposition should match the entirety of the voice that you use as a company. But I think also it's interesting to think about in our communications around that product, because products may vary, you know, especially, you know, say a company that has, this seems like a very straightforward like example, but children's toys. If you're selling toys to like multiple different age groups between like, you know, 6 months and 3 years old, and then 3 years old to 6 years old, and then 6 years old to 10 years old, and then you've got toys for all the way up to people that are like 16, you would communicate those things differently. You'd have a different voice for all of those different age groups. So I think,
Would you though?
I'm just assuming.
I don't think you would, because ultimately for anything that you're selling like that, you're selling to the same purchaser, not the end user. So that's like a little distinction to always keep in mind.
That's true, but I would argue that once kids reach a threshold where they can read, they're the ones that are mostly consuming the language.
Around age 9 is when that switches for how you market to them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about the overall range and how you market that versus individual ones. But should you match tone and intent when marketing the overall, like everything around that product to your value prop, or would all of that kind of mesh into how you communicate in general? I feel like there would be slight tweaks between
small
products.
Things.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be little differences and nuances between who you're selling to, even with the same product. So you do want to be a little flexible. If you're selling the same product to a business versus to an individual consumer, you can use slightly more corporate feeling language, but not with the business, but not in a way that's going to betray your overall personality as a brand. Because again, they're an individual at the end of the day. But I know, especially here at WordStream, when we were talking to other marketers, we always want to be very conscious of where people are in their marketing journey. And so when we're talking to different end users, we're going to talk to them a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But in the same way that's really consistent with our voice.
Yeah.
But if you know you're talking just to consumers and just to a really narrow niche of consumers, which is always easiest, you can have as much fun with your personality and voices as you want.
Yeah, which I think is a cool ability and kind of like a, that's what I'm looking for, exercise, I guess. Do you think that testing comes into play here, or do you just kind of like set it and forget it?
Test everything. Definitely test it. One of the key parts of the role that I'm in now is when we are crafting messaging for a new product or feature that's going out, is putting that messaging in front of customers and seeing what they think about it. Sometimes we even try to solicit messaging from them, like, how would you talk about this? What would you call this? I always ask them if I've actually hit upon all of the key needs that they would have, or if this feature would potentially address something that I haven't even thought of. And what's really fun about that is frequently it elicits them telling their own stories. They're like sort of imagining how they might use it and how it might benefit them. And I'm just like writing all of that down. And then that turns into even more concrete, real life focused messaging later.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one way to test, is you're in the process of creating something still, just getting it in front of potential users really quickly.
should you test internally as well?
Definitely test internally. And then even when something is live, you want to continue to tweak and refine as needed. One of the cool things about landing pages is that you can there are lots of tools to help you get them up real fast.
Yeah.
And so you can A/B test different value props for the same thing using 2 different landing pages, which is always really helpful.
So our last episode, we talked to Kate and Jed about creating a website in general. So if you're like just kind of starting out with your business and just getting your website live and using one of these, website tools such as Squarespace or Wix, they do have tools for using, for creating landing pages. And I think some of those built-in aspects include testing, and I'm sure there's copy testing, copy testing, like 50-50 splits that you'd be able to do. So it'd be an interesting practice to, like you said, use a value prop on a landing page, and then kind of, if you have a couple different versions that you're going back and forth on, or if you want to tweak some of the language back and forth, I think that'd be like a really cool exercise, especially once things are live. Okay, I want to hear some of your favorite examples.
Cool. So I'm a little biased about one of these because I just love the brand in general, and I'm personally a customer. Getaway House, which is absolutely fabulous. They have little cabins in the woods or in the desert or in somewhere out in nature that's generally about an hour to 2 hour drive from a major city across the country. And you have no Wi-Fi, cellular is usually pretty bad. And it's just you and nature and a lovely, comfy, air-conditioned, heated cabin with running water and a shower.
Nice.
It's like it's like camping for millennials. It's great. And their value prop is a day off for the always on. We offer simple escapes to tiny cabins nestled in nature.
Nice.
It's like everything I want.
Yeah. I do like
It's
the
perfect.
end of that, how I like the use of alliteration because I feel like it makes it memorable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do love like that warm feeling that it gives you.
Yeah.
Is that how a lot of their messaging and branding is?
Yeah. They do have a couple different value props that they use on like a banner that they'll generally have scrolling across their site. What I really like about this one is it clearly communicates who it's for. It's for the people who are always on. Yeah. And what is it? It's a day off. And they just fit so nicely together. It really has a wonderful rhythm, and as you said, feels just really warm and really happy.
Yeah, I really like that. How do they use it? Do they have it on a landing page? How did you find it?
So this was on one of their banners on their homepage. They have a similar one that's about unplugging that they have on another one of their scrolls. Cool. But they use messaging like this all over the place.
I think that's really helpful with branding and recognition in general, because even if I don't, like, I don't remember the name of the company already. Like, we've been talking for like 3 minutes. But I feel like I would remember a value prop like that if I were to interact with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It has a good like emotional punch to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It made me immediately think that I need to go hang out in a cabin in the woods.
It's great. It's great.
There's an Instagram page called, I'm going to find it for you. It's a really good follow. Highly recommend.
Good to know.
It's about cabins. I think it's called Book of Cabins. Oh, Cabin Love. And it's just like all of these beautiful, just small cabins. And every time one pops up on my feed, I'm not one of those people that ever gets through my feed on Instagram. So like sometimes I'll go months without seeing like a post from them. But when I do, like, that's just gorgeous. It gives me so much like wanderlust and just, I feel like I need to go rent a cabin. So now that I know that that's a possibility, it's amazing. What's the name of it again?
Getaway House.
Getaway House. I did forget for sure.
There's one in New Hampshire.
There's a Getaway House? Nice.
Yeah.
Do you know where in New Hampshire?
Near Concord.
Oh, cool. That's not too far.
No.
Cool. Do you have any other examples?
Yes, I do. Okay. Lee and Low Books is a children's publisher based in New York. They're a very small business. And one of their key value props is Lee and Low Books is the largest multicultural children's book publisher in the United States. We are your diversity source.
Oh.
And it tells you exactly how it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is punchy.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So what kind of books do they publish? All like children's, just
Children's
any
through
kind?
teens.
Cool.
Lots of fiction.
Yeah, that's really cool. And how do they use it?
So they have theirs directly below a banner image on their homepage. They have a slogan by their logo right in the top left corner. They also have this in sidebars across their website. Sometimes I see it on the right, sometimes I see it on the left.
Cool.
They kind of have it all over the place just to make sure that you always remember they are number one.
Source.
and it's true. They create really wonderful books.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Cool. I would love another one.
You want another one?
Yeah.
So Contently is a really good one. Contently, one of theirs is Tell Great Stories. Contently helps leading brands build loyal audiences through premium original content. I like the other ones better because they're a little more punchy at who they're for.
Yeah.
But what I like about this one is the value is right at the beginning. Tell great stories.
Yeah. So what does Contently do as a company?
So they have evolved into a content marketing service.
Yeah.
How I originally discovered them years ago is through their freelancer network. So if you're a freelance writer, you could create a profile on their website and then they would help you connect to different companies that are in need of content marketers.
Yeah. Cool. And now they're kind of like a software that helps with content marketing. Awesome. So Tell Great Stories is it feels like it could be a standalone slogan as well.
For lots of different things.
Yeah.
It could be like the standalone value prop for like my life. Tell great stories.
Tell great stories.
Maybe someday.
Imagine if we all had to just come up with life value propositions. And when you met people, you had to tell them your value proposition.
We should just go around and do that as marketers. Like, hi, welcome to WordStream. What's your value proposition?
That would be a great exercise.
We should do that in a meeting.
As a marketing meeting.
We should do that.
Everyone has to come up with one. I do like the idea of doing that as like an exercise. It would be interesting. But back to the Contently example, I think that it's interesting. Do you know if they use that with other like secondary halves of that sentence? Or is Tell Great Stories and that the rest of it kind of put together a lot? I feel like Tell Great Stories is such
it's a great
standalone slogan.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that actually.
Somebody at Contently has to let us know. Let's talk about the first example again. Why do you think that it's effective for them? I mean, we had a reaction when we heard it, right? And we might be, two people that are within their target audience.
I think we are.
Yeah. I agree. But how do you think that they identified that would be successful for them? And in what specific ways do you think that it helps bring about success in overall marketing efforts? So including things like advertising, writing, content in general.
One of the key things they've obviously done is decide to do one thing very well. Yeah. They just do tiny cabins nestled in nature. They don't really do anything else. They do other, there are other flavors of things that they do. They have like a blog. They do artist fellowship where you can apply as an artist and go spend a weekend at a tiny cabin and work on whatever your project is. But they really just do one thing. Yeah. And that makes it so much easier as opposed to trying to do a lot of different things and serve a lot of different people.
Right.
They know that they're just serving young urban professionals who really need to get out of the city.
Yeah, who need a little bit of nature.
Yeah. It's very simple and straightforward.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to the language that they use, I love their, alliteration, but I also love how comforting it almost brings about a sense of tranquility. Like if you were to book a cabin, you would just feel comfortable. And that's what their writing has provided, which I think kind of gets to the heart of, one, their voice and understanding who their target, people really are and how they want to be communicated to. When it comes to small businesses and people that are just kind of starting out and trying to define their first value proposition, how do you think they should go about, creating their first value proposition and then actually putting it to work when it's when the rest of, their marketing structures might not be in place. If it's kind of, I think about it as going so close alongside the creation of your product or of your service that once, you have that created and you have built a business around it and you're ready to kind of go to market, how do you think that first iteration should work?
I would definitely suggest getting something on paper sooner rather than later, and then not being wed to it.
Yeah.
And going through that customer validation process and soliciting ideas from them. If you're starting a business itself from scratch, obviously you have so many pieces that are going on.
Yeah.
And really understanding who you are as a business and who you're serving and trying to narrow it down to as specific of a thing as possible is going to be really, really helpful when you have 1,000 things that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
If you have a business that's in place and you're trying to launch a new product or new service, really making sure that the value proposition that you're coming up with for that new thing and making sure that supports your wider proposition as a business and helps tell that story that you've already crafted is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, I think it also kind of goes back to that value prop kind of being central to creating the rest of it, and everything kind of ties back to that, and making sure that what you're doing serves value and what you're doing goes back to how you want to be serving people. I think once you have that kind of brought out and clearly defined, it makes it easier to make sure that everything that you're creating and everything that you are, working towards as a business to bring for your customers or for your prospects aligns with that again. So it kind of feels like a circle.
It is definitely a circle.
Interesting. So we're almost out of time. I've learned a lot about what a value proposition is and how it should be used. Do you have like one final piece of advice or one main takeaway that you think is super important for small business owners or marketers to think about when it comes to value propositions and creating them and using them?
I'm going to say two things because one of them I've said a lot, which is try to do just one thing. If you can, really keep your value proposition focused on the one thing that you do really, really well with that product or that service for your end user, and focus on one end user as much as possible. If you start trying to be all things for all people, it's really hard to market like that, and it's really hard to craft a really short, snappy, powerful, compelling value prop for that.
Right.
The other thing just about copywriting in general is that if you're not having fun when you're doing it, you're doing something wrong. So don't be afraid of it. It can be a fun process. Do it with other people. You don't have to do it by yourself. Feel free to test things, try things. Feel free to have things not work at first and to write terrible things. My first drafts are always awful and are littered with all kinds of silly references to random stuff just to get the gunk out. And just have fun with it.
I also think that writing less than polished first draft is such a good way to get started in writing what you want to be writing or what you are targeting to have your output be. I think it's a really good way to just kind of, like you said, get the gunk out and just write something, get something down, because the longer you stare at a blank piece of paper, the more daunting the task feels. I know that's how it feels for me every time I have to write anything, whether it's a text, recipe, notes for the day, a blog post, copy for anything. I feel like the longer I kind of let the blank space fester, the bigger of a ordeal it is. So I think just getting something out there is a really good piece of advice. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Me. Yeah, that was great. So next week, we're going to be talking with Eric Manser about how to create and identify a customer persona. So stay tuned for that next week, and make sure you're following along at Gold Talk Podcast on Twitter. It's a really great place to keep the conversation going and ask any questions, make any requests that you have. So make sure you're following along there, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.